Hello, I'm Lisa Tabor, guest host along with John Forty while Mike Wassenaar is on sabbatical. Next on the St. Paul Forum, I'm talking with Nora Murphy, author and activist. Again, next on the St. Paul Forum. Hi, Nora Murphy. Welcome to the St. Paul Forum.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks.
We're happy to have you, and the reason why I asked you here was because I recently met you as a fund development person and then got to know you a little bit more as an author and an activist, and so I wanted to share that with the rest of the residents in St. Paul. And I know you're working on some interesting projects, but first let's go back to all of the hats that you wear. Can you tell me a little bit more about your fund development, authorship, or writing, activism, and anything else that you do make a living at?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for inviting me to the show. I was born in St. Paul, so and I still live in St. Paul, so it's great to be a part of the St. Paul Forum. I have spent the past 20-some years working in fund development for a number of community-based organizations. I started working in the Southeast Asian refugee community here in St. Paul. I worked for 5 years with Hmong American Partnership. And then I began working in the American Indian community, and also now I also do work in the Latino community. So I have had a chance to share some of my writing skills with lots of different communities, and it's a real give and take kind of a relationship. I've learned a lot more than I ever thought that I would.
How does it happen that you're working with so many of the diverse ethnic communities as a fund development person?
You know, that's a good question. I'm not entirely sure, but I do know that there was a pivotal experience for me, that a couple of experiences that really made me want to be a part of partnering with different communities other than my own, the white community. And one of these experiences was sitting on a board of directors for what was called CFCI, Children's Family and Community Initiative, which was a funding arm of the F.R. Bigelow Foundation. And the idea of that was in the Summit U and Frogtown neighborhoods, that residents of the neighborhood would make funding decisions for good projects in the community. And that project no longer exists, but I was one member of a very diverse board. There were 5 African Americans, 5 Asian Americans, 5 Latino Americans, 5 American Indians, and 5 European Americans. And we all sat at the table together. And I'd never seen anything like that before, where everybody was at the table together. And once I had a taste of that, like I think all of us who got to sit at that table, so how could you possibly go back?
Right, right. Is that your first taste of fund development too, or the fundraising, foundation, grant making?
No, I had already done, been a grant writer and stuff for some of these organizations.
Oh, independent then?
Yeah.
How did you start out doing that?
Well, I had lived in Southeast Asia for a while, and when I moved back to the Twin Cities, I was amazed, after having been gone for 10 years, amazed to find that many Southeast Asians had moved here while I was away from the Twin Cities. And I thought, oh gosh, I would like to keep that connection going to some of those cultures, because I'd enjoyed my time in Southeast Asia tremendously. And so I started volunteering with a Southeast Asian community organization, and that led to a kind fellow named Huang Tran who invited me to learn to write grants for him, and he kind of taught me.
Really?
So it was on-the-job training.
Well, that's a great opportunity,
Yeah,
though.
it really was.
Absolutely. And so were you successful with your first one?
Yeah.
Really? So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of like fishing. If you haven't gotten your first bite right away, you probably don't like it too much.
Yeah, but it was great. It's wonderful to be able to I remember we got a grant for a youth program, for a Southeast Asian youth program, and that brought so much joy to be able to know that, to be like an in-between channeler between the philanthropic community and then the Southeast Asian community, so that youth program could get going.
So did you start as a writer then? Is that where your profession, your heart lies?
Well, I think my grant writing got me more comfortable with writing, and then that led me to want to do more writing.
Really?
And so as I got more comfortable writing, as I said, that got me interested in writing books. So I've written a couple of books for children.
Oh, tell us, what are they?
I wrote a book about a Hmong family that is called A Hmong Family. It's for 4th through 6th graders, and it tells the story of a Hmong family that left Laos, went to Thailand, then to California, and then finally settled in Minneapolis.
Oh.
And then I wrote a book called African Americans in Minnesota, co-authored with another woman.
Oh.
And that was a companion book to a curriculum that we developed that Minnesota Historical Society Press published.
Oh, okay.
And it's available for teachers and classrooms in the Minneapolis and St. Paul public schools.
Great.
So, and then that led me into wanting to write more, so then I ventured into writing like short stories and memoir for adults.
Oh, lovely. And you have at least one of your essays featured in a book by the Minnesota Historical Society.
Yeah,
right?
Last year MHS Press put out a collection of essays about Minnesota at 150 because the state was celebrating its sesquicentennial, 150th year of statehood. And I have to say I wrote a rather contrary piece that they did publish. So
Whoa.
that was
So what does that mean?
Contrary piece.
Contrary.
Well, when the sesquicentennial was being celebrated, much of the Native community was completely cut out of the story. And my years of partnering with different American Indian organizations had taught me that American Indians were here first, and that this land belongs to Native people first and foremost, and that they are our hosts. So the idea of having 150th celebration of statehood and not including the direct voice and experience of American Indians really caused pain in my heart. So my essay kind of explores how it is that not just the Sesquicentennial Commission, but all of us don't really have access to the real story of Minnesota.
Interesting. We're going to get back to that because that's part of your activist hat role. So I'm interested, though, in what you bring to the table as a grant writer and how you mediate the relationship between the nonprofit or the grant seeker and the grantor. So tell me a little bit more about how your process for helping grantors who tend to be more mainstream organizations, usually pretty homogenous, how you help them understand better the role and the viewpoints and the assets that especially the minority community organizations can bring to the table.
Wow, that is a really great question.
You're on the spot, Nora.
Okay. I think that I mean, I definitely do try to do that. I feel like my job is to listen, and that sometimes, I mean, just think about in a family. There are different personalities, different ways of communicating, different, even sometimes different values. When we get into the world of work and power dynamics in our economy, there are a lot of different values all going on, and different languages that get spoken in those that go along with those different value systems. So I guess I feel like it's my job to listen to the needs and the desires and vision of the communities that hire me to work, and to find a way to translate that vision into a language that the mainstream funders will understand. And sometimes it works, but sometimes it doesn't work.
And where do you think, how would you coach your client or the nonprofit? How would you coach them potentially to change or alter or adjust their message or approach even for fundraising?
I think that if we have a vision or something that feels right in our heart, we shouldn't change it. So it's a more matter of tailoring it. I don't think it's. I don't think we should cut the vision or cut the heart. Yeah. But being strategic and being out there and building partnerships is really important. So dialoguing, inviting people, again, to the table so people can sit down at the table with one another as much as possible is really important.
And how would you coach foundations and grantors to help them better understand what nonprofit, especially, again, minority community nonprofits bring to the table for them to help them achieve their missions?
Well, I've never had an opportunity to do that before.
Consider this your opportunity. Especially, and I ask that especially in relation to your experience having been able to help with grant making on that side, because very few of us have, I think, any opportunity to be able to award funding, to really look at the grants that are out there and really carefully select a funds to go to a nonprofit. So that's why I ask.
Yes, well, that community board that I sat on all those many years ago with the arm of the Bigelow Foundation was my only grant-making experience. But I think funders, by and large, either it could be a state or a government entity, or it could be a private foundation or a corporate foundation, they have their own agenda and their own priorities. And so I guess I would just say, yes, we understand that you need to honor your own priorities for the sake of your institution, but it's really okay to just drop everything for a moment and just really listen and to really go for the heart. I think that's what I would tell people.
Okay. If you're just joining us now, I'm speaking with Nora Murphy, author and activist, and we're going to jump into that activist piece now. And I think the phrase that you just ended with, that people need to listen, you bring that, I think, to everything that you do, is sort of helping people listen, and yourself listening and being quiet. And so now you're helping to better inform Parks and Rec system in St. Paul and some other groups about Native American history and tradition around Crosby Park and making sure that there. So tell us a little bit about how, number one, how did you get, what is the effort that you're helping to lead, and how did you get involved in that?
Well, I am part of a loose affiliated group of volunteers who are really interested in preserving and restoring Crosby Park and the lake within Crosby Park. There are no leaders in the group. We're just all friends. But I happen to live in the Crosby Lake watershed, and all of our waterways, I never knew this before, they all like drain to certain places, and some of our St. Paul drains into the Mississippi River, and others drain maybe into Phelan Lake, I'm not exactly sure, and others drain into Crosby Lake, which sits down on Shepherd Road, right across from Pike Island, where the Mississippi and the Minnesota rivers join. Well, Crosby Lake Watershed Management District is putting together a new plan. Just like all organizations, you come up with your 5-year plan or your 10-year strategic plan, and they have invited community input. Well, I have met some people who are also very interested in preserving Crosby because it's the largest natural park in St. Paul. And it sits on the river. It's not just a city park, it's also a regional park. And that stretch of the river is within 72 miles of a national park. And here we have in St. Paul this incredible natural area where there's, you know, wild, open space, lots of animals. And St. Paul at this moment is not just Crosby Lake water management is under discussion, but St. Paul Parks and Rec are taking a look at how they're going to be managing the parks in the next, 5-10 years. And a group of people who are called the Great River Park folks are developing a plan for how to manage the river. And there are some ideas that have come forward in, again, community kind of forums of maybe making new developments along the river. But my personal belief is that a place like Crosby, because it's this incredible, beautiful wilderness area in St. Paul, should be preserved. But it turns... As is, kind of an as-is situation. But not just as is, because it turns out, Lisa, that Crosby Park sits at an incredible sacred historic site for the Dakota Nation. Now, the Dakota are the first indigenous peoples of Minnesota, and this is their land. The Dakota were here when the first Europeans arrived to do exploring, when the fur traders came, when then, the U.S. government came looking for land to build a fort. And in 1805, some of the Dakota signed a treaty to permit a fort being built near this confluence of the Mississippi and Minnesota rivers. In exchange, however, the Dakota were given the right to continue to use the land as they needed. It happens to be in Article 5 of the 1805 treaty that was signed between the U.S. government and the Dakota Nation. So when we talk about maintaining Crosby as a natural place, I think we can do even better. And it doesn't mean building like climbing walls or a giant water park. It's bringing an awareness to all of us who live in St. Paul of the incredible importance and significance of this region to the Dakota, and the incredible gift that the Dakota gave to all of us who have come here since. If the Dakota hadn't signed that treaty, we wouldn't have St. Paul. We wouldn't exist. So the sad thing is, how many of us know that the Dakota are our hosts in this land? Not very many of us. So I'm personally really interested in making sure that as the St. Paul Parks and Rec and the Great River Park Plan and Crosby gets their plans underway, that we include a way to bring Dakota history and culture and contemporary use to the fore.
So this is the purpose of your group, your band
Right.
of volunteers,
Right.
to ensure that there is not just the maintenance of the Crosby Lake and the park around it, but that there's also some level of interpretation
That's right.
that would
Yeah.
reach school kids and visitors alike.
Right.
Okay.
And there are other things we might do. The group that we've formed is called the Bedote Restoration Commission.
Oh.
And Bedote is the name of this sacred region where the Mississippi and Minnesota River come together, right, by Crosby Park and the lake. And that is the Dakota name of this region along the Mississippi. And I don't know very much about that myself, but there are some incredible Dakota historians who can, who you could bring on the show to tell more about that.
We'll do that.
But many people in the Bedote Restoration Commission include, we have tribes who are going to be signing resolutions in support of this.
Great.
Dakota School, the Indian Land Tenure Foundation, some, residents, Dakota residents of the area, and other American Indian organizations who are also really interested in bringing awareness to the area of the significance of the river. And so,
Is there precedence for this?
my understanding is that Carver Cave, which is below Indian Mounds Park, was renamed at one point when the Bruce Vento Nature Sanctuary was made. Unfortunately, the new name Wakantipi, which is actually the old name, doesn't appear on any of the interpretation so much. So maybe it's a beautiful restoration down there that the park did, and many people did a lot of work to do that. But unfortunately, that awareness level of the significance of that site along the river to the Dakota is missing because the name isn't quite visible to people. There is some good interpretation.
So is there, was there a threat at all to Crosby Lake that you see, or is there a threat to Crosby Lake besides in the midst of this planning that the city and the departments, all the different departments are doing?
No, I think it's just sort of regular business to check in on our waterways, and how lucky are we that there are people who work for our government who are like checking to make sure that our water is safe and everything.
Yeah.
But I think it's not that there's a threat, but this is an incredible opportunity, and that St. Paul could, if we took the opportunity to partner with the Dakota Nation and create a model of coexistence where we are together shepherding this incredible gift of the water and the land, and we have a chance to learn from one another. That would be incredible. That would be, I think, unprecedented, but St. Paul could be on the verge doing that, unlike any other city in the country.
First step as an intercultural city, right?
Yes,
A true intercultural city with the first people here.
Yes, it could happen.
Yeah, that's great. And so your group of volunteers, I want to say the Mary, the Batote Restoration Commission are in it for the long haul. What's the outcome? Tell us a little bit about some of the outcomes you're expecting to get in the next year, you'd like to get in the next year.
Well, we're hoping, we put forward language about the historic and cultural significance of the river in St. Paul, and we hope that that will be included in St. Paul Parks and Recs plan, in the Great River Park plan, and in the Crosby Lake Water Management plan. And we also have asked for some action steps, which include having Dakota presence or a Dakota representative involved in all future planning and implementation. We haven't quite figured out how to do that. But it makes sense, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
If this belongs to the Dakota by the 1805 treaty, then indeed, why wouldn't St. Paul invite Dakota presence at the table?
Right.
We would like to see Crosby renamed, and we would like to see interpretation available across the city about the significance of this land to the Dakota.
Sure.
And according to the 1805 treaty, the Dakota, part of the use of the this area that the Dakota did not give up, and that the U.S. government negotiated as a fair trade for creating Fort Snelling and then the subsequent cities of St. Paul and Minneapolis, was to be able to fish. So in the waterways.
Interesting.
So another thing that we're asking for, who knows what will happen, is the right for Dakota to fish freely in the river and in Crosby Lake.
Is there a fishing dock or anything there now?
In Crosby Lake, there's not really a dock, but people do fish. Yeah, it's not. Well, an important thing is Crosby Lake and that whole park is a floodplain, so it kind of the levels of water and the kinds of fish kind of ebb and flow depending upon, the cyclical nature of the water coming in.
So, last question. We're going to wrap up. Big question: are they listening? Are you seeing any kind of response that's giving you hope?
Wow, that's a great question. I think so. One fellow who's helping as an incredible volunteer just has received some positive comments from some prominent people in St. Paul, and so we're excited about that. And we are very eager to find out what kind of language, if our requests will be included. The first step we'll find out in March. Middle of March, there's going to be the release of the draft water management plan for Crosby Lake. Okay. So we'll get to see if some of our requests for language and action are included.
So Nora, we're going to wrap up now. Thank you very much, and best of luck to you and the Batote Restoration Commission. Correct?
Yes.
Yes. Is there any way that our viewers might be able to contact you if they have any questions or want to offer support?
The St. Paul Parks and Rec has got, you can click on their website and find out about their current projects, and
drop an email to them?
Drop an email to them.
Okay.
And to Anna Alaria.
Anna Alaria,
at the Watershed Management District.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Nora, for being on the show. Really appreciate it. And please join us next time on the St. Paul Forum.